Now on BBC News, the latest from New York and around the world. Business Today.
Live from New York at the opening bell, this is Business Today, where investors are holding their breath ahead of the Federal Reserve's rate cut decision. Borrowing costs are widely expected to come down for the first time since December, after months of mounting attacks from the White House, and also coming up on the programme.
This is the week that I declare that UK will be an AI superpower.
A ringing endorsement there from the world's most valuable company. NVIDIA's boss, Jensen Huang, speaks to the BBC about investing in Britain and why he's disappointed in China's chip ban. And the AI bonanza continues. Microsoft pledges $30 billion of investment in the UK as Trump's state visit seals huge transatlantic tech deals. We hear from CEO Satya Nadella. Welcome to an action-packed Business Today, live from New York. I am Michelle Fleury, and we'll bring you those interviews with the two most valuable companies in the world, the CEOs of Microsoft and NVIDIA, in just a moment. But first, happy Fed Day. Investors are on tenterhooks ahead of a crucial decision from America's central bank on interest rates. The Federal Reserve is widely expected to cut rates down for the first time since December last year. And markets right here at the opening bell, well, they are little changed as investors await that decision. For more on market reaction, let's bring in Ron Sanchez, Chief Investment Officer at Fiduciary Trust International. Ron, good to see you this morning. Look, what's more important today, the expected rate cut or the policy outlook as revealed by the dot plot?
The latter. The policy dot plot will take front and center stage, as well as Powell's conference call after. As you mentioned, it is widely expected that the Federal Reserve will resume cutting rates. Again, they put that on pause in December of 24, and the high probability they will resume today another 25. But what will be interest to investors is, one, how much dissension there is. There is some expectations that some will advocate for a larger cut, meaning 50 basis points. And there are those that would articulate or advocate, I should say, for holding rates to let sort of uncertainty in the economy play out, to have a better view around the outlook. But most important is the summary of economic projections of where today we'll have a better appreciation of how the Fed as a committee and each member views the outlook for the economy, views the outlook for unemployment, and views the outlook for inflation. And those three being summarized in their expectation about the direction of policy, both not only in the near term, meaning the end of 25, but also forward looking the end of 26.
Look, Ron, briefly, explain to me this pressure campaign and the dissents you talked about people are going to be looking at. Why have we not seen more reaction from stock market? You've got the S&P and the NASDAQ at record highs.
Yes, I think markets have done a very nice job of sort of bifurcating sort of noise and political pressure. I think that's true all the way back since April. Markets have not haven't been overreacting to a lot of the administration's sort of rhetoric and the pressure on the Fed, which I think in sort of, if I look back, would have been very unsettling for markets. But markets, again, continue to believe that the Fed is independent. They have been for a long time. We do believe that here, and that the Federal Reserve will remain so despite sort of constant pressure to lower rates here.
Ron Sanchez, we're going to have to leave it there. Fiduciary Trust International, thank you very much for joining us. Well, that decision is expected in just over 4 hours' time. The Open Market Committee is widely expected to cut the Fed funds rate by 0.25%, bringing it into the 4 to 4.25% rate. Now, President Trump has been calling for more aggressive rate cuts for months. The last cut was way back in December last year. Now, the meeting comes as a U.S. appeals court rejected President Trump's attempt to oust Lisa Cook from the Fed Board of Governors. However, Stephen Miron was confirmed by the Senate on Monday evening to join the board. And let's go through all of this with Laura Cooper. She is senior macro strategist at Nuveen, an investment manager. Good to see you, Laura. Let's start with the economic backdrop, and we'll get into the politics in a minute. If you look at it right now, we've got a weakening jobs market, rising prices. I mean, that's the worst of all worlds, isn't it, for policymakers?
And that's the clear tension that the Fed faces when actually coming through with what their policy path could be. We are seeing a disappointing labor market. We did have a fairly tepid payrolls print. We also had very sizable BLS revisions that did bring the run rate of job growth over the past year to well below what we have seen historically. So they're balancing that labor market dynamics against another backdrop where inflation continues to surprise to the upside if we look at core goods in particular. And we expect that that measure is actually going to further climb in coming months as some of the tariff impacts start to feed through to prices. So very much a tricky balancing act for the Fed today.
A balancing act. In terms of October and December, those are the remaining meetings this year. Do you think there'll be more rate cuts then?
I don't think they will signal that they're going to cut at consecutive meetings, but that's a challenge for markets who are already positioned for the Fed to see today as a signal that they're going to have an aggressive easing path forward. So we're looking at markets, they're pricing in about 6 rate cuts over the next year, but that's against a backdrop where the price pressure risks are still tilted to the upside. So I suspect the Fed today is going to signal that they're going to remain data dependent. They're going to strike a balance between watching the labor market and watching the inflationary pressures. And when we look to the dot plot, really where FOMC members expect the policy path to be, we're still of the mind that they're going to signal one more cut later this year, likely in December, and then potentially increase the dots to 2 next year against a backdrop of a higher unemployment rate. So still a disappointment to markets who are expecting greater cuts to come.
Lots to watch there. Laura Cooper, senior market macro strategist at Nuveen. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, the boss of NVIDIA says he is disappointed that China has reportedly ordered its top technology companies to halt purchases of the firm's artificial intelligence chips. NVIDIA, the world's leading chip maker, had previously been banned from selling its most advanced chips to China before Trump reversed that ban in July. CEO Jensen Huang is one of a number of tech bosses, including Microsoft's Satya Nadella, accompanying the US President Donald Trump on his state visit to the UK. The company was one of many US tech companies to announce investments into the UK as a tech pact between the two countries was signed. Our economics editor Faisal Islam caught up with Mr. Huang a few moments ago and asked him why the UK was seen as an attractive destination for AI investment.
The research is fantastic. The universities are fantastic. The AI ecosystem, the startups ecosystem is really vibrant. This is the 3rd largest AI startups ecosystem in the world, only behind United States and China. And so I think that the moment is right. It's just missing the infrastructure. You know, you can't build an industry without infrastructure. You can't create this industry without the AI factories.
It could be a superpower, the UK, really?
Well, this is the week. This is the week that I declare that UK will be an AI superpower, and that was the mandate from Prime Minister Starmer. He wants the UK to be an AI superpower. He recognizes that the ingredients are all right here.
And we'll bring you more of that interview later on the channel, including why he'll be ditching his leather jacket tonight. The investments into the UK from US big tech also keep coming during President Trump's state visit. Microsoft, the world's second most valuable company, says it plans to invest $30 billion into UK artificial intelligence infrastructure by 2028. Betting big on Britain's technological future as part of a US-UK tech agreement, which includes the likes of Google, Nvidia, as we mentioned, and OpenAI. Now, speaking exclusively to the BBC, Microsoft boss Satya Nadella says AI could boost the UK economy by 10% in 5 years. And he was speaking to our technology editor, Zoe Kleinman.
We've been in the UK since 1982. It's 40 plus years, and we've consistently over all these decades invested in the UK to bring the best technology so that we can then have customers across the United Kingdom. So that's the goal for us, is to be able to really, at the end of the day, make these long-term capital investments because of the attractiveness of the market and the policy stability across governments in the UK. And to me, that is what allows us to be able to sort of go year after year, decade after decade, and bet on the customers of the United Kingdom using this technology to, quite frankly, create technology that then is used around the world.
The UK economy is pretty sluggish at the moment, I think it's fair to say. When do you think AI is going to deliver this promised 10% growth boost that we're supposed to be getting?
Always, whenever anyone gets excited about AI, I want to see it ultimately in the economic growth and in the GDP growth.
So could we say in 10 years?
Well, I mean, you can never predict. So the point is, since it all is compounding, right? So the ability for AI perhaps to benefit from even the investments everyone made, even on the cloud, it may happen faster. So our hope is not 10 years, but maybe 5 years. But it does take time. I think there's no shortcutting the time for diffusion and also change. Let's not ignore the fact that organizations also have to go through the hard process of how to change the processes that adjust to these new levels of productivity.
Is there a danger that the UK is giving up its digital sovereignty, though, by doing so many deals with US companies like Microsoft?
You should be mindful of is we are making this capital investment in the UK soil, right? So these are AI factories, cloud factories that are very much part of the infrastructure of the United Kingdom. And so you have now trusted American technology that UK can use and companies across the UK can use to create more technology for the United Kingdom and for the United States and the world. And that's, I think, what's happening both in the United States and in the UK. And it's a good example, I think, of how every country in the world should probably be, thinking about their policy, their regulations, and the attractiveness, right? So it's not about auctioning, it's more about attracting.
Lots of questions, of course, still about where the power will come from, where the land will come from, but good news for the UK economy. Now, before we go, just time for one last story. The co-founder of the American ice cream maker Ben & Jerry's has quit the firm because he says it's being silenced by its owners. Jerry Greenfield accused Unilever of breaching a merger agreement that protected the brand's social activism. Since its creation nearly 50 years ago, Ben & Jerry's has been known for backing campaigns such as issues as LGBT rights and climate change. And that's it from us on a busy Wednesday. Thanks for watching here, Business Today. Goodbye.
Thousands of people have come here to the centre of Seoul this evening. They have come to celebrate the newly elected president, Lee Jae-myung.
He's been firing rubber bullets at the direction of the crowd, and it shows you just how volatile the situation is.
We're seeing scenes of destruction like this one across Mandalay, and the reality on the ground is there just aren't enough pairs of hands.
Given the scale of the attacks we've seen over the past 48 hours, it doesn't feel like we're in ceasefire territory.
There when the story breaks, BBC News.
Welcome back to BBC News Now. I'm Lucy Hockings. The prime suspect in the disappearance of British toddler Madeleine McCann in 2007 has been released from prison in Germany. Christian Bruckner had been serving a 7-year prison sentence for the rape of an elderly woman at her home in Portugal in 2005. Prosecutors have told the BBC he will have to wear an electronic ankle monitor for the next 5 years. And in the last hour, the Met Police Chief has said they are taking stock of the German and Portuguese investigations, but her disappearance remains a missing person inquiry. Our correspondent Bethany Bell is outside the prison with more details.
Well, there are big questions about what it was, the involvement of Christian Bruckner in the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. Those are charges he denies. He's never actually been charged either by the German authorities or by the British authorities in terms of the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. But the German prosecutors say they believe he is the chief suspect. They say they have evidence to link him to the death and disappearance of Madeleine McCann, but they say those are not strong enough for them to issue an arrest warrant. Now, Christian Bruckner was released today. We understand because German prosecutors believe he is still dangerous, he's been given an ankle tag and he's had to surrender his passport. Now, he's also a suspect in the Metropolitan Police's investigation into Madeleine McCann's disappearance. They recently put in a bid to interview Bruckner, but Bruckner refused that. Now, he has left prison today. His lawyers have not said where he's going, but the German authorities say they will continue to investigate him.
Israel says it has struck more than 150 targets in Gaza City since it launched a major ground assault on Tuesday. Gaza's Civil Defense Authority reported that 12 Palestinians have been killed. It comes as over 28 organisations working in Gaza call for urgent intervention after a UN Commission report concluded that Israel was committing genocide there. Israel said the report was based on biased sources and false information. People attempting to leave Gaza City have crammed their belongings into overcrowded vehicles. Some have set off on foot. Some of the routes out of the bombarded city are, as you can see, really clogged with traffic as well. The IDF has said they have opened a second route for people to escape the fighting in Gaza City. These are live pictures you can see here on the road to Wadi Gaza. There has been, though, repeated airstrikes on the places that Israel is telling people to go to. So that's leading to a huge amount of fear and uncertainty and people not wanting to leave their homes in Gaza City because of that. And other reports we're getting, not just from the Civil Defense Agency, but also hospitals in Gaza, say more than 50 people have been killed today, some of them in the north. And the specialist hospital that cares for sick children was also damaged when its upper floors were targeted 3 times today. So those are the developments to bring you from Gaza as we look at these live pictures of people leaving on the road to Wadi Gaza. Here, ministers are facing a setback over their migrants' returns deal with France. It's known as the one-in, one-out scheme. A man from Eritrea who arrived in the UK by small boat has won a last-minute legal battle to block his removal temporarily. Our political correspondent Nick Eardley says it's a problem for the government.
One, because we had been told that the first people would be removed to France this week. That hasn't happened yet. It's not going to happen today, although government sources are saying this lunchtime they are still hopeful that it could happen later this week. The second reason is because the government had hoped that this plan was legally watertight. And challenges like this suggest that it might not be, that it is going to be possible for some of the people earmarked for removal to France to launch these last-minute legal challenges to stop or delay their removal. Now, the argument coming out of the Home Office today is that this is an interim decision about one individual. And we heard from the Cabinet Minister Liz Kendall earlier that it wouldn't thwart the entire scheme.
It will not stop this really important deal from going ahead, a deal that says if you come to this country illegally, you can and you will be deported. You know, we have never claimed that that is a silver bullet to tackle all of the problems that we face with small boats and illegal migration, but it is important, and Shabana is determined to make sure that that works.
So determination from the government. If you have a sense of déjà vu, though, you're probably not alone. Why? Because this isn't the first time that legal challenges have stopped the government trying to implement a new scheme. Remember the Rwanda deal that Boris Johnson tried to get off the ground? That didn't happen, yes, in part because of legal challenges. Now the Labour government is trying a different scheme, and that's getting mired in rows in the courts as well. So this is something that ministers will be absolutely desperate to make happen. There is some confidence, as you heard from Liz Kendall there, that it is still possible, but quite exactly when and on what scale, still to be confirmed.
The man accused of murdering the American right-wing activist Charlie Kirk has made his first appearance in court. 22-year-old Tyler Robinson has been charged with aggravated murder and 6 other offences for which prosecutors are seeking the death penalty. Our North America correspondent Neda Tawfiq reports.
Tyler Robinson appeared via video link wearing a green smock to prevent self-harm.
Tyler James Robinson.
Speaking only to confirm his name, he otherwise wore a blank expression as the charges were read out against him.
In that on September 10th, 2025 in Utah County, the defendant, Tyler James Robinson, intentionally or knowingly caused the death of Charlie Kirk.
The 22-year-old could face the death penalty if found guilty of murdering Charlie Kirk, one of the most prominent right-wing activists. Earlier at a press conference, the Utah County attorney said the decision to seek capital punishment wasn't easy.
I do not take this decision lightly, and it is a decision I have made independently as county attorney, based solely on the available evidence and circumstances and nature of the crime.
Tyler Robinson is not cooperating with authorities, but his parents and roommate have been speaking.
Robinson's mother explained that over the last year or so, Robinson had become more political and had started to lean more to the left, becoming more pro-gay and trans rights oriented.
After the shooting, Robinson pointed the roommate to a note under his keyboard, which said, "I had the opportunity to take out Charlie Kirk, and I'm going to take it." After reading the note, the roommate responded, "What? You're joking, right?" The roommate asked why he did it. Robinson replied, "I had enough of his hatred. Some hate can't be negotiated out." The roommate then asking how long he's been planning this. Robinson said, "A bit over a week, I believe." It'll be some time before Tyler Robinson stands trial. In the meantime, here at Utah Valley University, they're trying to move forward. Students will be back on campus for classes for the first time since last week's shooting, hoping for a return to some semblance of normal life. Neda Tawfiq, BBC News, Orem, Utah.
The widow of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny says new scientific evidence proves that her husband was poisoned. Navalny died in February last year in mysterious circumstances while serving a 19-year prison sentence following a number of charges widely seen as retribution for his campaigning. Yulia Navalny says samples from his body were tested by 2 independent labs. The Kremlin has declined to comment on the claim. The former Arsenal footballer Thomas Partey has denied raping 2 women and sexually assaulting a 3rd woman. The Ghanaian midfielder pleaded not guilty to 5 counts of rape and 1 charge of sexual assault when he appeared at Southwark Crown Court. The alleged offences took place in 2021 and 2022, whilst the 32-year-old was regularly playing in the Premier League. His trial is due to begin in November next year. Let's just take you back to Windsor Castle and events there as President Trump and his wife Melania are spending the afternoon with the royal family ahead of the state banquet that will take place this evening. It will be a glittering affair. Lots to look forward to from that banquet, where we will bring you details and coverage throughout the day here on BBC News. And these are the other live pictures coming to us now, and they are from central London. It's a long way really from what we've seen today, the pomp and pageantry in Windsor, where this No, these are not live pictures actually. These are pictures from earlier of the President and his wife arriving with and being greeted by King Charles and Queen Camilla. People pleased to see Queen Camilla there today because she was unwell yesterday with a sinus infection. Taken in a carriage around the grounds of Windsor before they inspected an honour guard at Windsor Castle and then inside for lunch. Here are the live pictures for you now of central London. It's a long way from the pomp and pageantry in Windsor. There's anti-Donald Trump protests gathered close to where we are, BBC headquarters, for this demonstration. It's been organised by the Stop Trump UK Coalition. It's a group of more than 50 campaign organisations, including climate, anti-racism, and you'll see the flag there. Pro-Palestinian activists are also there as well. More coverage from Windsor throughout the day, and Matthew is here next. Do stay with us here on BBC News.
One of the only advantages of being the old guy is that I've known every major world leader in the last 30 years, and I've known them personally.
There's a thrill in not necessarily following a straight line, do you know what I mean? Trying things that are different, challenging myself.
I'm an optimist. I'm always believing that anything can be done if you have the will to do it and if you have a clear vision.
Women are still judged by a different metric than men, and certainly judged by a different metric when they do something wrong.
I will continue on with a life of public service, so I will always
support the charities and the people that mean so much to me.
When the big names talk, they talk to us.
Live from London, this is BBC News. President Trump arrives at Windsor Castle for his historic second state visit. He was welcomed by the King and Queen with the carriage procession and a guard of honour in a day dominated by pomp and ceremony. Ahead of a flypast this afternoon, we'll hear from our correspondents at Windsor, where security is tight and the red carpet has been rolled out. Protests against the President's state visit are taking place. We'll be live in central London. Hello and welcome to BBC News. Donald Trump has started his first full day of his second state visit to the UK. He was greeted by King Charles and Queen Camilla as he arrived at the Windsor estate. The President and First Lady were then taken by horse-drawn carriage to the castle. The scale and size of the military ceremonial is unprecedented today. And this afternoon, there'll be a joint UK-US flypast, another first. We'll bring all of that to you live here on BBC News, and a little later this evening there is the state banquet. More on all of that in a moment or two. First though, Tom Simons reports on events so far.
When Sir Keir Starmer handed Donald Trump a letter from the King last year, the Prime Minister said it was a really special invite. Reality this morning involved the unpredictable British weather and the iron grip of the security lockdown required to protect the world's most powerful man. But Donald Trump arrived from grey skies on Marine One for a royal and military extravaganza designed to impress but reduce any political or actual risks. The President and First Lady emerged to be met by the Prince and Princess of Wales. This is significantly his second state visit, the first hosted by the late Queen. President Trump claims to have been friends with the King for some years. He'll have plenty of time to cement that friendship today with a lunch and a state banquet this evening, both at Windsor because of renovations at Buckingham Palace. The weather resulted in a switch from the preferred open carriages, and this procession was entirely within the grounds of Windsor Castle for security reasons. There were no opportunities this morning for either Donald Trump's supporters or protesters to see the President. The ceremonial show began with the sovereign's escort of the Household Cavalry and continued with 3 of the oldest army regiments. Defence officials said an exceptional extra-large Guard of Honour had been deployed, language which seemed, intentionally or not, to echo words Donald Trump might use. The main politics will be tomorrow. The President told the media before he left he would discuss trade. Britain is still trying to nail down an elusive deal on steel tariffs. The government's tougher line on Israel, it's likely to recognise a Palestinian state, might cause some friction. No one wants to discuss the President's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. This van appeared in the area this morning. But this was Britain dressing to impress for a president who seems willing to be impressed. The hope is that all of this can reinforce international goodwill and that goodwill might translate into political and economic advantage. Tom Simons, BBC News.
Well, we'll be live in Windsor in just a moment. I want to show you these pictures because they've just come into us. They are pictures of the King and Queen and Donald Trump. And in the lunch break they've gone to view a display at the Royal Collection exhibition, which is in the Green Drawing Room at Windsor Castle. And there you see the President, King Charles and Queen Camilla smiles as they look at some of the artefacts on display, and there you can see the President taking a keen interest, and we are told that amongst the items the President is looking at a general history of Virginia. There's original watercolours made by Mark Catesby, also a letter to Lord North from George III about the state of the rebellion, and also a letter from Samuel Hood to General de Bude about the Battle of Chesapeake Bay in 1781. So just some of the artefacts that the President has been shown just in the last little while there at Windsor. Let's go to Windsor live to our Chief North America correspondent, Gary O'Donoghue, who is there for us. Gary, welcome here to the programme. You can't control the British weather, but everything else has been absolutely tightly choreographed. Give me your assessment of this day one, the first full day of this second state visit.
Well, I think they couldn't really have hoped for anything better so far. As you say, it's been incredibly well controlled. The timetable slipped a tiny bit this morning, but that doesn't really matter. It didn't pour down with rain. It was pretty grey, but they didn't get drenched. That would have been a bit of a disaster, I think. So I think things are going off pretty well. We saw those pictures there of them looking at those artefacts, particularly related to the United States, including that letter you mentioned between Lord North and George III, talking about rebellion in the United States, and dated 1774, so just 2 years ahead of the Declaration of Independence, and that 250th anniversary, of course, on Americans' minds next year. We've also seen this afternoon them releasing the details of the gifts they've exchanged, all pretty kind of standard stuff. A book about America from King Charles, also a bowl I think they've given to the First Lady, and in return a sword, a replica of Eisenhower's sword. And of course Eisenhower was the chief Allied commander during the Second World War in this country when D-Day was happening, etc. So that has enormous significance, I think, for the relationship between the two countries. And I think the Queen may have got a brooch from Tiffany as part of her gift. So a lot of that sort of thing is part of the protocol as well. We're going to see a fairly solemn event happening probably maybe around now in terms of visiting the St George's Chapel, where of course the late Queen is laid to rest, and a wreath will be laid there, and there'll be some choral, some of the choristers will sing, I think, some Vivaldi possibly, and then again later on this afternoon, that much more sort of if you like spectacular, rather than these sort of low-key events, a more spectacular event with this beating the retreat and the fly past and the state dinner with 160 guests tonight.
Gary, we'll see all of that live here in the coming hour or so. We will hear a lot in the next few minutes about the UK perspective of this visit, but give me your thoughts on what the US perspective is, what Donald Trump wants from a state visit like this.
He wants recognition. He wants recognition that he is a significant figure of the 21st century, which I think it's difficult to deny that he is. If you cast your mind back to his first state visit, there were still very much questions in the air about whether Trumpism, whether Donald Trump himself, the president, whether he was a bit of an aberration, if you like, a bit of a thing that was a moment in history that might come and go, and things might revert to how they'd been before in terms of American politics. And I think what we've learned since then is that is not the case. There have been significant changes in America, and Donald Trump has tapped into those changes. And a lot of people will disagree with those changes, and a lot of people, or enough people, voted for him to give him a second chance. So that has forced a recalibration around the world in terms of this president, and particularly here in the United Kingdom, that regards the US as one of its closest allies, and as a country on which Britain's national interest utterly depends.
He has spoken so warmly in the last 24 hours about King Charles. What does he think, though, of Keir Starmer? He has always liked a winner, and of course Keir Starmer had that massive majority at the election just over a year ago, but rather more troubled times at the moment. Yeah, I mean, I would hesitate to suggest that Donald Trump has a
a sort of detailed understanding of the internal politics of the United Kingdom. In fact, during my interview with him, he called Keir Starmer a liberal. He's done that on other occasions as well, but he still likes him. And of course, whichever political mind dreamed up the King's invitation that he delivered in the Oval Office back in February, really, I think, hit the nail on the head. And I think the interesting thing for me is that over the last few months, since the beginning of this administration, you've seen in many ways world leaders take that playbook, that way of dealing with Donald Trump, with the president, as a sort of way forward that Keir Starmer set out. It was if you remember, I'm pretty sure in the same week that Volodymyr Zelensky got that absolute kebabbing in the Oval Office, if you remember. And Keir Starmer managed to do something very different. And I think, a lot of people around the world, a lot of leaders around the world have followed suit.
Gary, we'll be back to you a little later. Thanks very much. Just as Gary was talking to me there, a little word on who was actually at today's lunch at Windsor. Just 6 members, apparently, of the royal family joining the US President and First Lady for lunch in the state dining room. The King, the Queen, the Prince and Princess of Wales and the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester. So those are the people in attendance for today's lunch. Let's speak now to Gillian Tett, head of King's College, Cambridge, and a Financial Times columnist. Gillian, welcome here to BBC News. So here we are, halfway through day one of this second state visit. What are you keeping your eye on today?
Well, the first thing to say is I'm actually talking to you from New York, and the American television shows this morning have been absolutely filled with pictures of Windsor Castle and all the pomp and ceremony, as you've just said, that's been rolled out for the President Trump. And there's this mood of extraordinary excitement about all this because, this is a country which is used to looking at Britain through the lens of things like the Crown television show or Downton Abbey. And this really plays into their vision of Britain in many ways. And the British government knows that President Trump is a transactional person when you're trying to do negotiations. Britain has some things to offer, but perhaps its most powerful card, to use the image cited by J.D. Vance, the Vice President, its most powerful card to play, frankly, is all this pomp and ceremony and the fact that President Trump loves being on television. This is made for television stuff. He loves the idea of being honoured. He loves the idea he's getting more honour than any other president and more than Emmanuel Macron, the head of President of France. And he also knows that this kind of image plays really well with his domestic base. So the British government is playing this very, very cleverly in terms of tapping into, frankly, what President Trump most cares about right now.
The pictures, and we are looking at some of the pictures from earlier in the day, exactly as you say, they've been quite spectacular over the last few hours. How would you calibrate the success or failure, though, of the trip when it comes to an end? Because I heard one analyst suggest that if Donald Trump leaves the UK happy, that is the success that is needed.
Yes, to be very cynical. I mean, I trained as a cultural anthropologist before I became a journalist, and this really is best viewed through a kind of anthropologist lens of tribal behaviour. This is about offering tokens and tributes, if you like, in many ways. What the British government wants to get out of this is, first of all, not to be victimised with tariffs and punished with tariffs and things like that. They'd like to cut the tariffs on a number of key goods too, but that's not actually under discussion right now. They'd like to have more collaboration in the financial sector because financial services are crucial for the UK. They are very keen indeed to have collaboration around AI and quantum. Quantum is one of the crown jewels for the British economy right now, or British academic world right now. Speaking from Cambridge University's perspective, amazing research going on that a lot of the Americans are very interested in. And of course, there's always the very slippery questions around NATO and Ukraine. The British are very keen indeed to get support from Washington around that. And of course, the much more controversial question about the Middle East and the fact that Keir Starmer has said he will recognise a two-state solution. So there's a lot on the agenda, but frankly, creating this halo effect of made-for-TV, quasi-Downton Abbey meets the Crown's images for President Trump is one way to soften it up and, if you like, project soft power or Hollywood-style soft power.
You summarise it very, very well in that pithy phrase. Let me ask you about Epstein. Does that shadow cast long in all of this? Because you have Prince Andrew frozen out, unlike Donald Trump's first state visit. You have Keir Starmer, the whole fiasco around Peter Mandelson, and of course Donald Trump himself around the huge pressure on the Epstein files.
Well, absolutely, the Epstein issue is something that's hanging in the air, that people are hoping that the American media, or rather President Trump and co, are hoping that the American media talk more about the horses in the parade. And by the way, there's been a lot of discussion about those horses on American TV this morning. They're hoping that drowns out the Epstein issue. Now, for the American audience, the Epstein issue has been so live and dominant in recent weeks that in some ways there's not a lot of shock value there. I think for the British audience, there's a lot more a sense of coming newly to this issue again in relation to Peter Mandelson. So I think that certainly reporters will try and ask President Trump about that, and Keir Starmer. They probably will not want to say anything at all, but it is deeply unfortunate and embarrassing to have lost your ambassador to the US just before this visit, hence all the focus on the horses.
Yes, and we saw how the president reacted to a question he didn't like as he got on to Marine One as he left the White House yesterday. So it'll be really interesting to see how the press pack, when it comes to tomorrow and all those political issues and those questions get thrown at the leaders, quite how he responds. But we're getting ahead of ourselves talking about tomorrow. I just want to ask you a final question about the unpredictability of this president, because that always has to be navigated, doesn't it? I was reminded last night of when Theresa May met with Donald Trump for the first time, and it actually leaked that Donald Trump thought that Boris Johnson might negotiate a better Brexit deal, and that became the banner headline. That is something that will be very acutely at the forefront of a lot of British politicians tomorrow.
Absolutely. I mean, it's very important with President Trump to distinguish between strategy and tactics. And the unpredictability, the bullying, the element of surprise, the threats, those are the tactics that President Trump uses all the time to basically underscore the wider strategy. So it's very deliberate. It's a feature, not a bug, of their whole modus operandi. And so there is a fair chance that President Trump will spring some surprises, or at least revel in keeping everyone guessing. And I guess one of the questions I like to ask is, anyone who's seen the movie Love Actually knows about this potentially quite tricky dynamic between British presidents and leaders and American leaders, because on the one hand, people like to talk about special relationship. On the other hand, the Brits hate being bullied. It plays very badly within the wider public. And so something everyone will be alive to in number 10 is whether or not President Trump is going to be seen to be so bullying and aggressive that he embarrasses Keir Starmer or in some way creates a backlash. So it's going to be a very difficult tightrope to navigate. And I'd say, once again, if this was made for TV state visit, boy, are they getting it now. The question is whether we have a plot spring or plot surprise like Love Actually.
Gillian Tett, always great to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us on today's programme. Let's continue with this. Let's speak to the royal commentator, Caroline Aston. And Caroline, thank you for being here with us. I mean, the UK is famous, isn't it, for pomp and ceremony. We've seen every inch of it rolled out today, haven't we?
Well, we certainly have. We do it so well, don't we? But then, of course, we've had many, many centuries of practice to get it this right. No two ways about it. President Trump is getting what he wants, a framing of him in a gold frame. He said on his way over on Air Force One there were going to be some great photographs, and, well, we've already seen them, haven't we? And the whole thing reminds me rather of a celebration cake. You've got the royal icing, which is what we're seeing, but the quality of the cake underneath you won't really see till you take a great big chunk out of it and analyse it, perhaps retrospectively. But it's all going spiffingly well, isn't it? And I believe what the previous speaker said about a glorious cocktail of Downton Abbey and the Crown, rather. I nearly said crime, which may be a Freudian slip. I don't know. So going forward, I think we look out now for the fashions, the state banquet. all of it really still unfolding like a wonderful royal cavalcade.
Now, of course, in his first state visit, people picked up on that moment where Donald Trump walked ahead of the Queen, because there is so much protocol, isn't there, on a day like today?
Well, yes, and he will have been briefed about it and probably will remember the little faux pas last time. And that's the point of all of this. Both the King and the President will have been briefed about behaviour, presumably about the kind of ideal small talk to engage in. But as I was saying earlier today, you bet every body language expert and lip reader will be absolutely on the money as they watch to see what they can pick up or detect. But at the moment, the body language is very good, very positive, and I thought the Princess of Wales, making a very welcome appearance, greeting Melania Trump, looked stunning in her Amelia Wickstead deep burgundy outfit with bespoke Jane Tyler hat with netting, and Melania Trump, well, yes, in very sombre Christian Dior, wearing one of those hats that she favours with an enormous brim which protects her from the English weather but also conceals her eyes. Remember when Mr. Trump was invested as president? She had a brim then, and they're great for keeping people at a distance and hiding underneath.
Caroline, great to talk to you. Thanks for joining us. We have to leave it there. We're going to take a very short break. Before we do, I just want to show you the live pictures from central London, not far from where we are here in the BBC, but that is the protest that is also happening as we speak. We'll get the latest on that. So much of what we've seen with Donald Trump through the course of this morning and early afternoon is within the grounds of the Windsor estate, of course, away from any sort of protest. So we'll get the latest on that element of what we've seen today here in a moment or two. Around the world and across the UK, you are watching BBC News. Welcome back to BBC News. Now, as well as the pomp and ceremony today, there are protests taking place. We were seeing the live pictures only a few moments ago against President Trump's state visit. These are the live pictures from central London, from a demonstration organised by activists from the Stop Trump Coalition. Well, let's go to our correspondent Nick Johnson, who's amongst the protesters. And Nick, tell us more about the size of the protests, the security, and what people are saying to you.
Yeah, Matthew, we're quite close to the front of this march, which set off about 40 minutes or so ago. We think, I mean, it's always hard to count here, but we think around 5,000 people on this large Stop Donald Trump protest. Now, the Metropolitan Police, which covers London, says around 1,000 of its officers are here to police and facilitate this protest, but also up to around 500 officers from other parts of the country as well. And this protest really is a confluence of views. A lot of people here say that they don't want Donald Trump here for lots of different reasons, but one of the things they've made very clear is he is certainly not welcome here. I'm just going to speak to Amanda. There she is. Amanda, this is your first ever protest you've been on. Why make this one your first one?
Because I think it's important for the future of my children and my grandchildren and the climate and women's rights. So for me, this is a very important moment for me and for the world that we recognise that this man is not helping the future of our climate and our country and our children.
He is the leader of one of our closest allies.
Yep.
we should be engaging with him, yes?
I think it's very difficult to engage with the tyrant, and I think if you capitulate to all his demands and a liar, yeah, we're not going to get very far, and we're just appeasing a monster, really.
OK, Amanda, thank you. Pleasure. Tyrant, monster, just a few of the words, albeit actually some of the milder ones here, used to describe Donald Trump. Think back, Matthew, to that last state visit in 2019 when Donald Trump was here. There was also a very large, very noisy protest here. Organisers of that estimate around 75,000 people were here at the time. As I say, it's difficult to count at the moment. We're in the middle of London's Regent Street with just a few metres. I can see Piccadilly Circus just behind the camera, but I'd say about 5.
Well, the line is beginning to break up. Nick, I'm going to just try one more question, because what are the authorities saying about those images of Epstein and President Trump that were projected onto the walls of Windsor Castle last night?
Yes, Thames Valley Police, that's the force which operates in Windsor, arrested 4 men as a result of those images being broadcast onto the side of Windsor Castle. They've been arrested on suspicion of malicious communications, and Thames Valley Police says it's now conducting a full and thorough investigation.
Nick, thanks very much. We'll catch up with you a little later in our programme as those protesters move to central London and a little later to Parliament Square. Back to Windsor in a moment or two, but unsurprisingly, the state visit is dominating today's papers here in the UK. I just want to show you some of the front pages, because the ego has landed. That is the headline from the Daily Mirror, with the paper suggesting protests against the president could overtake today's events. The Guardian reports Donald Trump arrived to a barrage of criticism from the London Mayor Sadiq Khan, who accused him of encouraging the far right across the globe. The Times focuses on the deal with American tech giants pledging to invest billions in Britain, despite President Trump standing firm on steel tariffs. And the iPaper suggests the Prime Minister is on collision course with the US President because of the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. So those just some of the front pages from today's papers here in the UK. Let's go back to Windsor and to Rajini Vaidyanathan, who's there for us. And Rajini, just walk me through what we're expecting in the next hour or so.
Well, let me start with what's been happening in the last half an hour, because it's been happening away from the cameras. President Trump and the First Lady Melania Trump have been in St George's Chapel here in Windsor, where they lay a wreath at the tomb of the late Queen Elizabeth. They were greeted by the Dean of Windsor, and the choir in the chapel sang Vivaldi's Gloria. They then met with some of the choristers and had a tour there, and we understand that has now wrapped up, but that was away from the media, a private moment. And of course, Matthew, it was during that first visit that President Trump was, of course, hosted by Queen Elizabeth.
Now, Rajini, of course, people in Windsor, they are quite used to being neighbours of the royal family. In terms of the conversations you've been having over the last couple of days, what do people say to you about this particular visit?
Well, I think there's a mix of excitement, and then you get people who don't really like President Trump. As I said before, when Mr. Trump visited the UK in July, that was for, of course, a private, not a state visit. He's a bit of a Marmite politician, and as we saw from those demonstrations in London, there are a lot of people who don't want him here. They don't want him to get the privilege of such a lavish state visit. But I have spoken to people here who were wearing Make America Great Again caps and are quite excited about the President and the First Lady being here. Now, in the last few moments, we have been told that there won't be a joint fly-past later this afternoon. We were talking about that being part of the ceremony and the celebrations here after the Beating Retreat ceremony, which is expected just after 4 o'clock or so. But we understand, Matthew, that due to the weather conditions, that joint fly-past won't be happening. But that Beating Retreat ceremony will see some 200 musicians, military musicians, gathering for what will be another lavish display for the visitors from the United States.
Regini, thanks very much. Let us just stay with that breaking line as we see the pictures and they see the miserable weather over Windsor. And I'll just repeat what Regini has told us. The joint F-35 flypast, the UK-US flypast, will no longer be possible because of the bad weather conditions. The Red Arrows part of what we're about to see after 4 is still expected to appear over Windsor. That is the latest here on BBC News. Welcome back to BBC News.